Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video today where we're continuing the classic Doctor Who reviews, continuing my run through the early stages of the third Doctor's era, the Jon Pertwee era, as we've recently hit the 100th anniversary of his birth, the centenary. Since then, the release of the Season 10 Blu-ray as well from his era. But for me, I'm only getting a little bit earlier into the Jon Pertwee era, and today we're looking back at Doctor Who and the Silurians. So yes, this is the second story from Season 7 of Doctor Who, Jon Pertwee's first season as the Doctor, so only his second story overall. And I think straight off, this is a pretty damn brilliant story once again. I've always held a very, very high opinion of, well, the Pertwee are generally, but in particular Season 7, and after the fantastic Spear from Space, which kicked off the whole era with just a cracking story, a great way of introducing all the new characters and companions and setting up the whole new world that we're in now, essentially, in Doctor Who. And then we get to Doctor Who and the Silurians, called Doctor Who and the Silurians because of a paperwork issue from what I remember, and which, because of, yes, it's bizarre that on the actual episodes they are titled Doctor Who and the Silurians, when presumably it was meant to just be called the Silurians. So it's a rather weird quirk that I think pretty much only ever happens in this story, and was, as I say, some sort of paperwork error or something along the chain that where it just kind of went a bit awry, because it was obviously never meant to be called that. But yes, this story is a 7-parter, so it's quite a long old story, best part of 3 hours to fill with an interesting sort of story to try and tell. And for me, this one is a really, really strong sort of, well, in every single aspect, particularly the story side of it, where we focus on this reptilian race, the Silurians, and the whole moral dilemma that we get in this story, which is something that's occasionally explored in Doctor Who, but I feel is kind of almost at its most significant, biggest in this story, when we have this whole moral dilemma of the Silurians were here first, so surely it's their planets, but then the humans have taken over, so the humans have turned up, and when the Silurians are away, and so now it's the humans' planet, and so who actually deserves to have the planet? Obviously the happy medium would be for them to live together, but that's looking quite unlikely, and so you just see these fantastic dynamics, and sort of the Doctor being stuck in the middle as the always right person, the peacemaker trying to stop a war breaking out between the two of them, trying to stop both of them from being militaristic and aggressive. And we see sort of throughout this story how really the Silurians and the humans aren't that different, and I think that's such a great, it's just a really, really clever piece of television, sort of really running that fine line and just showing sort of the darker side of humans in a sense, that they're out of fear to a large degree. They're scared of these unfamiliar creatures, these aliens, and are just throw all the soldiers in, throw the bombs in, let's get the guns, let's just shoot them all, when actually it would be possible to have, or potentially, given if you talk to the right Silurian, it'd be possible to sort of negotiate with them and work with them, but the humans are too scared of doing that, and most of the Silurians are too scared of doing that. The Silurians have this sort of superiority complex that they're just obsessed. They think they are the superior dominant race, they were there first, so we must just kill them all because we're better than them, they're just apes and all that. And then the humans, on the other side, just wanted to shoot all the Silurians because they think they're hostile and everything, and it's just such a clever idea, because at this point, I know since then we've kind of had this story rehashed a couple of times. The other sort of reptilian stories of the 70s in the Sea Devils later on, which isn't so much about this, but there's still a little bit of that in there. And I can't really remember how much Warriors of the Deep has got that or not. I really cannot remember. But certainly the Series 5 two-parts of The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, or Cold Blood, Hungry Earth even, that is a story that very much is to a large degree a rehash of Doctor Who and the Silurians. And Doctor Who and the Silurians is the first version and the best version by miles. It's such a well-told story, and just giving us this first insight, as I say, into the rather similarities between humans and the perceived villain. And I think that's what's so interesting about this story as well, is it almost feels like everybody's a villain to a degree, or a villain to the Doctor at least, because you've got sort of Dr. Lawrence, who's running this whole nuclear power establishment that's really not very happy about UNIT being there at all, and gradually getting more and more frustrated about the whole presence and nothing being done, and kind of loses his mind, and obviously gets infected with the disease as well, and dies at the end in a spectacular moment of him going completely over the top and crazy. Classic Peter Miles. He's such a great actor, and he does so brilliantly in this story. It's such a great performance for the role that we see, and yet him just completely losing it. I think it's in episode 5 or episode 6, something like that, and then obviously collapsing to the floor. But again, just showing even the people on the human side aren't all for the good, and all doing everything in the way that maybe almost the pacifist like Doctor would like to see, and would like the sort of solution to be. And I think it's so great that sort of end scene when we see the Doctor, the Doctor's just there fixing up his car, and then suddenly all the bombs go off, and the Doctor realises what's happened in terms of them, the unit deciding to blow up, or the Brigadier deciding to blow up all the Silurians and trap them down there, and just, it feels quite an ominous and quite dark sort of way to end the story, because it really does, we just sort of have this moment of everything's them all getting blown up, and then the Doctor's kind of feeling a bit sad about it, and then boom, that's it. There's no happy little moment for the end of the story. It's a very different tone to, I feel like, anything I could really remember up until this point in my marathon, in terms of a whole story ending on such a sort of somber note, and a really just almost a sort of not a cliffhanger, but leaving that open question to the audience of who really were the good and bad guys. You've watched this story for 7 weeks. Have you made your mind up as to, is it really the humans that are the good guys, or are they actually just as bad as Silurians? And it just keeps opening up that question, which I think is fantastic. Looking at some of the other aspects of this story, I think the Silurians as well, the costume-wise, I don't think it's as bad as some people say. Yes, it does look a little bit 1970s, but that's because it is. I think it works quite effectively. I think the way they are used early on in this story, the direction, is fabulous. It's such a clever build-up in terms of not really... I don't think we see a full Silurian until the end of episode 3, which it seems almost unheard of that you delay it that long before actually getting them involved or seeing them fully. But the brilliant sort of POV shots with that fantastic sort of three-eyed red, with a bit of red camera lens that they've used over it to give that POV shot of the Silurian wandering around, just seeing an arm here or a hand there or a leg there. It's just a brilliant way of building up the tension, building up the intrigue of to who really are these creatures, these monsters that are sort of terrorising the humans down in these caves and around these woodlands of the UK. I just think it's a great idea and a great way to just keep the suspense going. For me, I find it a story that doesn't really drag, despite being 7 episodes, and it's always thought of anything really 6 parts and longer, it has its slower moments, but I did watch it in sort of 3 or 4 episode segments at a time, in over 2 or 3 sittings, but it didn't feel at any point like it was particularly dragging out. I do completely get the logic, which as explained by Terrence Dicks in the documentary, about the fact that the whole adding the sort of virus that was going to infect the humans to try and kill them is literally 2 episodes of plot extension, or filling the story for 2 episodes. That's literally all that is. That it would have made very little difference to the story without that in there, and the story being 2 episodes shorter. And I get that, but I didn't think it was a bad thing to throw in. It just show the deadliness of the Silurians, and that moment where the lead Silurian, or the sort of younger, more angry and militaristic Silurian, kills the older, sort of more scientific Silurian who wants to go and sort of help and work with the humans, is more willing to be open to that, and just seeing how the sort of younger, stronger one takes over in that moment, and the sort of the attacking and aggressive mindset is what prevails overall for the Silurians, and therefore they go on the attack. They introduce this virus, which gets combated by the Doctor, giving him a moment to shine, where he sort of, he does have some great moments throughout this story, the Doctor, but he does feel like he's a little bit sort of helpless, trapped in the middle between the humans always wanted to attack the Silurians and the Silurians always wanted to attack the humans, and the Doctor just keeps jumping in there trying to create the peace, and he just never can quite do it. Every single time he thinks he might be getting somewhere, then some other stupid soldier comes in and shoots someone, or something bad happens, and it all goes awry again. And he just must be getting so tired and frustrated by the end of this story, how it's just, he just can't win, he can't escape this sort of trap that he's got himself into between these 2 different parties. I think the setting's really, really strong for this story as well. There's a few nice location sort of shots when we have the Silurian going out in the sort of fields of the UK and going around the barn and whatnot, but also the actual caves themselves I think are really, really well designed. They do look like a set, but in most of Classic Doctor 2, the reason that it looks like a set is because of the videotape look, which you know, which probably people who know stuff like us, who sort of fans who know a bit more about it, know what film looks like and what videotape looks like, and so it's very easy to differentiate between a set and what's real. But I thought it was a really, really strong set. It very much sort of, it looked quite expansive, but also claustrophobic at the same time. It kind of gave off a really sort of realistic vibe, I felt like. Having lots of sort of shadowy areas where the Silurians could kind of creep around, and also the humans could creep around at times as well. It was really, really effectively done. Given it's such a sort of major part throughout this story, I think it's really, really effective in just portraying that tension, that unease that it creates as you sort of see the Doctor for the first time wandering around underneath the CSO dinosaur, which is not the strongest point, or the rubber dinosaur, which is then CSO'd on as well later in the story, I think, which is just all a little bit bizarre and unneeded, and doesn't look. That's probably one of the weaker points, is the dinosaur in this story in the early episodes, which is just really not very good at all. But anyway, that's a small thing compared to most of the set design, which I think is really, really strong. The other thing which might be quite controversial that I really like about this story is the music which is used. It's certainly an iconic sound, those that I think the crumble horns used in this, in the score of this music, of this story. It's very much such a clever idea by Carey Blyton, who only scored 3 stories for Doctor Who: this, Death to the Daleks, and Revenge of the Cybermen, whereas only 3 stories he ever did, when basically Dudley Simpson did pretty much everything from the 70s, near enough, apart from those 3 stories. And so to give another composer a go just means you're going to get a different vibe, but he was a really, really clever composer in this aspect, in that he thought about the story, he thought about the Silurians, he thought about the fact that they are prehistoric, they were here in the past, they were here before any of the humans, and so naturally you would associate it with a sort of a more old-fashioned sound. And so he's gone and picked out all these kind of medieval instruments to create a very analog, very old-fashioned sort of sound that sounds, it doesn't almost sound like music at times, it sounds like these really interesting instruments being used in interesting ways to create sort of weird sounds that you're almost not really used to, because they are such unused instruments nowadays. But it also, I think, fits the sound of the Silurians so effectively. And it's so iconic. Every time you hear the sort of Silurian sting, you know there's Silurians about to come on screen. Yes, sometimes their moments of menace are a little bit taken away by the slightly comedic sort of rising and falling piece of music that's the little sting and theme that's used with them there. But overall in the story, I think it works really, really effectively. And also there's a lot of really, really good tense moments which are created in the caves by the use of the music. Because sometimes in classic Doctor Who there is a lack of music, particularly in the earlier days. And so it's really nice to be able to sort of see a story and listen to a story where the music is really being used to build the tension and to sort of guide the story a little bit more than what we often see. So yeah, I think it's an unusual sound that it's not going to work for everybody, but for me I feel like it's a really, really strong score to what is ultimately a really, really good story. So yes, overall that's only a quick, brief sort of roundup of the story. I'm sure I could waffle on in detail for ages about this story because it is such a fantastic one. But overall it's one that I hadn't watched for sort of 4, 5, 6 years maybe, I think, and so I was coming in fairly fresh to it, but actually, and I did have reasonably good memories of it, or I thought, what I remembered of it was that it was pretty good. But actually watching it again, I realised that it is a fantastic story. It flies along, it's got a great moral dilemma in the middle of it, it's finding a different way of doing an Earth-based Doctor Who story with great performances from the main cast, a great score to go with it, great direction. It just all round creates a brilliant overall story. But what do you guys think? That's my thoughts. I think it's a fantastic one, a great continuation to the start of the Pertwee era, but do you guys think differently? I know it's not always the most popular of stories, Doctor and the Silurians, so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say down below, whether you're not so much of a fan. Is this your maybe least favourite story of the Pertwee, I mean maybe not the Pertwee era, but of season 7 for example? How does this compare to the Sea Devils, which is kind of it's not the same story, but it's kind of banded together in the DVD box set and is somewhat linked in terms of sort of reptilian prehistoric races and whatnot. And so yeah, just let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about this story. But other than that guys, remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye!